The Greek gods didn't just kill people who offended them. Sometimes they built something worse, a punishment designed around the specific person who'd offended them. Some go on forever, some are over by sunset. All of them are the kind of thing that, once you hear, you don't unhear. Today we're going to walk through 7 of the worst. Some you've heard of, some you haven't. And by the end, I think you'll notice something disturbing about how the Greeks imagined divine justice. These stories come from a culture that worshipped these same gods. That's the part people forget. These weren't villains in a horror tale. These were the powers that ran the universe. And the punishments they handed down weren't just cruel, they were creative, designed, built for psychological devastation. Let's start with the most famous one, Prometheus. Prometheus was a titan, part of the older generation of gods before the Olympians. He's the one who, depending on which version you read, either created humanity out of clay or just took pity on us once we were here. Either way, he gave us fire, the technology that separated humans from animals. Zeus didn't want us to have it. Fire meant civilization. Civilization meant we'd start to look like the gods. So when Prometheus stole it from Olympus and brought it down hidden in a fennel stalk, Zeus invented something new for him. He chained Prometheus to a rock on the side of Mount Caucasus. Every day an eagle came and tore out his liver and ate it. Every night, because Prometheus was immortal, the liver grew back. Every morning the eagle returned. The genius of it is the regeneration. Prometheus can't die, he can't escape. The pain isn't a one-time event, it's a job. The eagle comes to work, forever. He's eventually freed, in some versions, by Heracles. But for centuries, this is the image the Greeks held in their heads. Their greatest benefactor, the being who gave them everything, in agony on a rock because a god was insulted. Sisyphus, the boulder. You know this one, but you might not know what he actually did. In the version most retellings remember, Sisyphus cheated death. Twice. The first time Zeus sent Thanatos, the personification of death himself, to bind him. Sisyphus tricked Thanatos into demonstrating how the chains worked, then locked death up in them. With death imprisoned, nobody on earth could die. Wars stopped working, sacrifices to the gods became meaningless. The gods had to send Ares to free Thanatos. The second time, Sisyphus told his wife not to bury him properly when he died, then complained to Persephone in the underworld that he hadn't received funeral rites and needed to go back briefly to scold her. She let him go. He never came back. He went home and lived to old age. Eventually they caught him, and his punishment was designed by someone who really understood him. Sisyphus, the trickster, the man who outsmarted death, would spend eternity on a task that could not be outsmarted. Push a boulder up a hill, watch it roll back down, push it up again. There's no puzzle to solve. No god to trick, just the stone and the slope, every day, forever. Albert Camus wrote a famous essay arguing that we must imagine Sisyphus happy. The Greeks did not. Tantalus. Sisyphus was punished with futility. Tantalus was punished with wanting. Tantalus was a king and a son of Zeus and a regular dinner guest on Olympus. The gods liked him. He had access to the table where ambrosia was served. That's the setup. What he did to get thrown out is one of the worst crimes in Greek mythology, and there are several versions of it. In one telling, he stole ambrosia from the god's table. In another, he revealed divine secrets. But the darkest version is the one most retellings reach for, that Tantalus killed his own son Pelops, cooked him, and served him at a feast for the gods to see if they would notice. They did. Only Demeter, distracted by grief over her missing daughter Persephone, took a bite, eating part of Pelops' shoulder. The gods restored Pelops to life with an ivory shoulder to replace what Demeter had eaten, and then they turned to Tantalus. His punishment is the origin of the word tantalize. He stands in a pool of fresh water up to his chin. Above him hangs a branch heavy with ripe fruit. When he bends to drink, the water drains away. When he reaches for the fruit, the branch lifts beyond his grasp. Eternal hunger, eternal thirst, surrounded by the things that would relieve them. He can see them. He can almost touch them. He never will. Ixion! Ixion was a king who murdered his father-in-law to avoid paying the wedding gifts he owed. That alone made him a pariah. Nobody on earth would purify him of the crime. Eventually Zeus, in a strange act of mercy, brought him up to Olympus and cleansed him personally. This was a mistake. Once at the divine table, Ixion looked at Hera, Zeus's wife, queen of the gods, and decided he was going to seduce her. Zeus noticed. To test him, Zeus formed a cloud into the shape of Hera and placed it where Ixion would find it. Ixion did exactly what Zeus suspected he would do. The cloud, by the way, later gave birth to Centaurus, the ancestor of the centaurs, but that's another story. Zeus's punishment for the man who repaid hospitality by lusting after his host's wife, Ixion was bound to a flaming wheel and set spinning through the sky for eternity. Some versions place the wheel in Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld. Either way, it never stops turning, he never stops burning. The Danaids. This next one is different. King Danaus had 50 daughters. His brother Aegyptus had 50 sons. Aegyptus demanded that the cousins marry each other, a forced mass wedding the Danaids did not want. Danaus appeared to agree. On the wedding night, he gave each daughter a knife. 49 of them used the knives. They killed their husbands in their sleep. The 50th, Hypermnestra, spared hers. She's not punished. The other 49 are. In some traditions, the gods actually purified the Danaids after the murders. Athena and Hermes are said to have cleansed them on Zeus's orders. But there's a later, darker strand of the tradition, set in the underworld, where they don't get off so easily. In that version, the Danaids are condemned to fill a great jar with water. The jar has holes. The water pours out as fast as they pour it in. They carry water from a distant stream in jugs perforated like sieves. They will never fill it. They will never stop trying. What's notable here is the moral fog. They were forced into a marriage by violence and responded with violence. Greek audiences would have understood that complexity. But the underworld tradition flattens it. They were given a task by their father. They completed it. The story gave them another task. They will never complete it. Marsyas. Marsyas was a satyr, a wild forest spirit, part human and part beast, and he was a brilliant musician. He played the aulos, a double-piped reed instrument. He played it so well that he made the mistake of believing he was the best. He challenged Apollo. Apollo is the god of music. This was already a bad idea, but Apollo accepted, on the condition that the winner could do whatever he wanted to the loser. The Muses were the judges. Apollo won. The punishment is one of the most graphic in Greek mythology. Apollo tied Marsyas to a pine tree and flayed him alive, removed his skin from his body while he was still conscious. In some tellings, Marsyas's screams and the tears of the forest spirits who watched formed the river that bears his name. That's hubris, not arrogance in general. The specific arrogance of treating yourself as the equal of a god. The punishment isn't about justice. It's about restating in the most visceral way possible the boundary between mortal and divine. Marsyas crossed that boundary knowing what he was doing. Actaeon. Actaeon was a hunter. A good one. He was out in the woods one afternoon with his pack of 50 hunting dogs when he wandered off the path and stumbled into a clearing where the goddess Artemis was bathing. There are several ancient versions of what happened next. In some, Actaeon meant to spy on her. In others, he boasted that he was a better hunter than she was. But the version most modern readers remember comes from Ovid, that he didn't mean to see her at all. He saw her. He realized what he was looking at. He looked away. It didn't matter. No mortal man was permitted to see Artemis naked. The crime was the seeing. Artemis splashed water from the pool onto his face, and Actaeon felt antlers begin to push through the skin of his forehead. His arms thinned and lengthened into legs. His neck stretched. He was becoming a stag. He turned to run, and his own dogs caught his scent. They didn't recognize him. He could see them, his dogs, by name, the ones he had raised from puppies. And he tried to call them off, but he had no human voice anymore. They ran him down and tore him apart. In some versions, his friends arrived after and praised the dogs for catching such a fine stag, not knowing what they were looking at. Later readers kept coming back to Ovid's version anyway. Of all the variants available, the one that stuck is the one where Actaeon doesn't mean to see anything. Here's what I think these stories add up to. Greek divine punishment isn't about fairness, not the way modern readers want fairness to work. We expect divine punishment to mean moral correction, a universe where suffering teaches a lesson. These stories are darker than that. The gods in them are easily offended, and offending them, knowingly by accident or by being slightly too talented at the flute, could bring consequences wildly out of proportion to the crime. The punishments aren't proportional, they're designed. They trap each person inside the shape of what they did. Sisyphus the trickster gets a task no trick can solve. Tantalus the host gets eternal hunger. Prometheus the giver gets to lose his liver every day for giving too much. These stories don't imagine the gods as fair. They imagine them as real, powerful enough that some things, once witnessed or attempted or stolen, could never be put down. That's the horror. Not the eagle, not the wheel, not the boulder, not the dogs. The fact that once a Greek god decides what you've done, there's no version of the story where you walk away.